want to like introduce yourself and say, what your background is a little bit?
So my name is Cameron Whittington. I have been doing martial arts for about a little over 20 years now. Started when I was five. My background is in Tang Soo Do primarily. I have a fourth degree in that. I have a first degree in Taekwondo, WT style. And then I have also done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a little bit of Kenpo, taught that for a little while. A little bit of karate, just through everything that I've done seminars with and stuff like that. Tricking for about 10-ish years. Not nearly what I used to be in that, just because I don't have the time to train it like I want to. I was actually considering going to an open gym this week, so I might do that. But just keep up with the basics on that. And then sport karate, I've been competing for about a little over 10 years now. I started in 2014 at the U.S. Capitol Classics. And just started with traditional back then. Didn't know anything about anything outside of that. I grew up in a very, very traditional school. So we had no concept of, the wider martial arts community. We didn't even compete. It was just all traditional stuff. So, which set me a good base, which I'm very grateful for. There's a lot of kids nowadays that have zero basis in their basics and they have no idea like how to keep things clean. They just want to do the big tricks and all that. So I'm very grateful for the basics that I have and I keep maintaining and I instill that in all my students. So I'm grateful for that, but it left me feeling a little bit behind schedule when I first started competing because, most kids, they start like Ben's age or younger. And then, I started when I was 17, almost 18. So I was just jumping in like right at the tail end of being a junior and then into the adults.
Yeah, and that always makes it hard when you don't kind of have that experience. We switched what we did from when I was a student because the circuit just fell apart, the politics and stuff over the years. Like, when I was a kid, I've went back and looked at photos from the 90s of tournaments. It was wild how large they were.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I remember the last year I was there, we barely had 100 people because this person would fight with this person, it just saturation, but also a lot of it was political. And so when I switched over to the open side, it was very different, but I loved it. I loved the challenge of it. I just loved everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was like getting into it later. And then some of my students at the time going from the styles that we had done to the open, it was a hard one when they don't come up in it. So I tell Ben and Jocelyn, I'm like, you guys have been doing these tournaments since we started. You've got a leg up in the future. You've got, this is just what you're going to go far just with having that experience, having an open mind.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen rise and decline over the years too. 2014 was it was pretty big tournaments back then. Even just the Capitol Classics. Capitol Classics is always a big one just because it's where it is. Right in DC National Harbor. It's a beautiful venue and all that. So they always drag a large crowd there. But I've seen that steady decline. It almost seemed like on average, my divisions would get 1 to 2 competitors smaller every year I would compete up until probably the lowest of the low I ever saw was probably 2018, 2019, around there. They got really, really small at that point.
Yeah, it seems to be everything's growing again now. It seems every time I see a post about a tournament, the overall size is bigger. I don't really know on the divisions. We weren't doing a lot of the bigger ones then.
Overall, it's huge, and it also just varies depending on the tournament. Like AKA is always massive because you got the NASCA banquet right now.
Yep.
So my divisions and the adults, which this is unheard of. I know you've competed with me a few times on like Korean and stuff. But like the CMX divisions, which are always typically like 2/3 the size of like the trad divisions, it was 30 deep at AKA.
Wow. Yeah, that division's all normally nice.
Yeah.
It's good to see the growth.
Yes, definitely. But then again, you go to the next tournament, compete or Ocean State, and they just sheer drop off because it's like competes so far for most people because it's like literal opposite side of the country. Pretty much every other NASCA tournament is like at least on the East Coast, if not near the East Coast. And then Ocean State is always typically a smaller tournament. It's very almost claustrophobic because their venue is so like tight. I don't know if you've ever been to Ocean State.
No, haven't been to either of those.
They have like it's not one big room. There's a series of small rooms where there's a bunch of different rings and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more disjointed. It's still a good tournament, but I think it's so like compact that probably turns away a lot of people. And plus, it's the location's just middle of nowhere. It's Rhode Island, which again, not a bad state, but not who's really cares to go to Rhode Island compared to like Atlantic City for Amerikick or Capital or DC for Capital Classics.
Well, I think a lot of people too, one of something that I've always noticed is that, it costs more money to have tournaments in a more desirable location.
Oh, yeah.
But if you can have your larger tournaments in a travel destination, in a place, it's so hard to do, to find the venue, the hotel connected, a location that everybody wants to go to, a time of the year when it's great to go there. Just that entire job of, before you even get to the part of how's the tournament, just the everything that's going to go with it, to hosting it, to where you're going to have it, all those little details, I really think at the end of the day add up over time, and they really do matter with where you're going to have the event, when you're going to have the event, what other events are going on. You never know. You might have something and find out there's 4 other things that weekend when we go to travel as a school, and we could go up the street or we could go a 6-hour plane ride away or whatever, that matters. That matters to people. That starts affecting the pocketbooks. That throws it off too. What age did you say you got into martial arts?
Martial arts, I started when I was 5.
5, and was that in the WT style or the Tang Soo Do?
No, Tang Soo Do. That's my original style. In near Baltimore, Glen Burnie, it's just a suburb of Baltimore. AJ Bartlinski is where I started. Again, very traditional school, great school. They're still around to this day. And actually, the reason I started there was because in the 70s, my dad took martial arts from them as well.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, they've been around for a very, very long time.
That's awesome. And what was it kind of that attracted you to martial arts?
My dad, combination primarily of him because he took martial arts in the 70s. He's also a black belt. And he took martial arts from them, and I loved watching Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, that kind of stuff, things with martial arts in it, not necessarily like strictly martial arts, but yeah. And then we had moved up here because I was born in Florida. We moved back up here from Florida, and once we got settled, he took me over to the school. He reconnected with some of the people there that he recognized, and then he asked if I wanted to try a class, and then never looked back.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I had always wanted to get into it. My story was different. My dad was kind of anti-martial arts. He didn't want.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my brother and my dad was Vietnam era age, and a lot of the guys he knew that came back and had trained would purposely get into fights and do different things. Like, he had kind of seen more of a negative side of it. And with my family having a bad temper, he always thought that, like, why, if I'm going to have a bad temper like him, my brother, my sister did, why train me too? He didn't understand that I've never had issues with having a bad temper because of martial arts. And, it's always cool to hear those stories and see that. And I always think about that one day with Ben and Jocelyn, when they start talking about, well, what got you into it? It's just all we've known.
Yeah. Well, it's funny the misconceptions people have about martial arts, like that your dad thought that this would enhance that negative anger, when actually in reality I see the opposite in most students.
Yeah.
If their heart's in the right place, it's not gonna fuel their negativity. It's gonna actually fuel positivity for them.
Yeah, well, and I get that a lot with students. Parents will reach out, hey, child has anger issues or PTSD, something like that. This probably isn't for them. And then you kind of have to have that conversation explaining that, no, it's actually great for them. And a lot of times, too, you still got to kind of prove it to them. I've never had kids come in and train, and I'm sure you've had the same experience where it made anything worse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it always helps.
Yeah, no, I've never had an experience unless the kid is specifically just a rough, gruff type of kid, those inner city like type of kids, which I've trained the spectrum of kids. I've trained kids with autism, different disabilities, Down syndrome. I've trained kids that come from great upbringings, kids that come from broken homes,
Yes.
Unless the kid is like genuinely just grown up as a bad, like had a terrible upbringing, is a genuine bad person, that's the only time that I can see it not having an effect, but I wouldn't say it's a negative effect. It's just I don't have any effect.
Yeah, well, so it's hard when I've tried to explain this to parents before, if your teachings in the classroom are not being emulated at home, it's going to take a lot longer, and it's not going to have the same effect as a parent that is working side by side with you. You know, if the child, you know, their only place that they're getting that reinforcement is in the dojo, but they're only there once a week.
Yep.
You know, that 1 hour compared to everything else, it does take a lot longer. And I've had that talk with several families from like, you know, it's going to be a lot. You know, we need them in class more. We need that group around them more, because when they're bombarded with negativity 23 hours of the day and they're only with you one, it is very hard. And it's a hard concept to teach too, because as martial artists, we know so many people market it as a one-time, you know, one-stop fix-all, you know, type thing that people are expecting, and in just our day and age, are expecting results now. And that is the real struggle as martial art instructors too, is getting that result when it's, oh, you just do so good and this and then that. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. That's hard, even with someone it's just battling, wanting to get in better shape, and they come in, they're like, oh, I just can't. I'll get adult students all the time, oh, you make the kicks look easy. I'll be like, how old are you? They're like 34. I'm like, I've been doing that kick for 32 years. Yeah, it should be. I was like, and it's still not easy. I'm battling age now and tightening up and stretching more and everything. I was like, but I've been doing the kick a lot longer. You've been here for 12 weeks. Like, we're going to get you there, but it does look easier when I do it.
Yeah, of course. And that's, yeah, people don't appreciate the grind as much as people used to. And it's not just of people of a certain age. It's just the hyperactive society that we live in now. You know, you have access to everything all at once.
I blame Amazon.
Yeah. So it's such I appreciate it because it's built my business for me. I wouldn't be able to survive if I didn't have this that we're on right now. You know, I teach at least 10 kids a week on Zoom, just in private lessons. But it's also created so much noise all the time that I can't get away from it very easily. It has its ups and downs with everything, but people just don't appreciate the effort that it takes, probably partially because they don't see it. You know, we do a lot of work behind the scenes to get where we are, you know, that's not visual to them. If they don't see it on the phone, it doesn't exist. So they must assume that when they see you do something, oh, you just instantly got that. But no, there's hours upon hours of work that I put in behind the scenes you just don't have access to.
Oh, for sure. And it's something I talked the other day. We were doing push-ups in class. I've incorporated 10 push-ups in every class. We go through them nice and slow to help the kids build core strength. I explain the reasoning behind push-ups. And I told them, I said, I got a hack for you guys. I got a trick to make your push-ups so easy. And they're like, what? I said, don't just do the 10 when you're here with me. Do 10 in the morning, do 10 at night. I was like, how about this? Do 10 at every meal, and you'll be great. I said, hey, just do 10 push-ups every time you say, Mom. I was like, you guys will be excellent at push-ups by the end of the night. And they all just look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, I'm telling you guys, if you do them more, I was like, I do 10 with you guys every class, 30-something classes a week. I said, I also do my own workouts I outside of here. I was like, you guys have to do that as well if you want to get better, if you want to progress faster. You know, the same thing like private lessons. You know, if you want to progress faster, one-on-one private lessons are a rocket ship to speeding you up because you're getting that dialed in direct training. And that's another hard thing for people to kind of grasp. I've always been lucky I've grasped and understood the benefit of a private lesson, but so many people don't. They see a student doing well and it's like, yeah, but they're also doing maybe 2 private lessons a week to really dial everything in. That's why they're doing well. And they practice on their own and they're in regular class.
Yep. Hard work breeds success.
Yes. I always like that. The harder I work, the more lucky I got. I always like that quote. I don't know who had it. Yeah. It's like the harder, it's always wild. The harder I work, the luckier I get. What is it that kind of drew you to coaching? Because I think people just assume that everyone that gets into martial arts and likes it just teaches. And that's really not how I actually had friends leave martial arts once they got to the age to kind of where they were pushed to teach and instruct more because that wasn't where they wanted to be. I was the guy that wanted to teach. They did not.
Yeah. I think and this is probably what a lot of people, I mean, I'm not speaking for you specifically, but speaking for a lot of instructors, we love what we do so much that we want to make this our career. And the only pathway to that reasonably is through teaching in some form or fashion. Now, I don't say that to say that I'm doing this just because I want to be in martial arts. I do genuinely love what I do for coaching, but you know, when I was 18, 19 and I needed to start getting a job, what am I going to do? Teach martial arts, because that's all I've known, since I was 5 years old. So I started working at the karate school at Barlinski's, where I grew up. And then I moved to the Kenpo school in Dundalk, American Kenpo Karate. I taught there for about a year. And then I just bounced between different schools for a while, gathering knowledge, learning things. And over time, and I've always loved kids. I love working with kids. I like being able to help shape their future in a positive way. And for me, my avenue through that is martial arts. And it's also expanded into adults because of the personal training I do. I work with clients for just, basic strength and conditioning at the gym. Work a little bit of boxing techniques with them. I'm not the best boxer, but I've learned a lot from my friends when it comes to that. But in terms of coaching, it's just, for me, it's the most rewarding thing I can do is help someone achieve their goals and influence their life for the better.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what motivates a lot of us. I think that's how a lot of us find each other too, is I know with me, it was the same thing. I've had other jobs, but I would always take time off from them to go to the martial arts stuff. And it took years and years and years of finally realizing that that's just what made me tick, is that helping and that going in there teaching. Even if I'm having a bad day, I joked about this the other day, wanting to tweak my class schedule. My 5 to 7-year-olds they're so much fun. And I was like, I think I'm going to tweak the class schedule and make that the first class every night, because it starts my night off in a great mood. I'm done with that class. I'm pumped. We're high-fiving, whereas some of the older kids are getting to middle school age. Maybe they're slacking that night. I get a little flustered with them. And I think as any coach, you're going to get flustered with them because of your passion for what you do and seeing the talent that's there. It's not tapped into, trying to motivate them. But it's the same thing for me. It's that I've told someone this before on the podcast, but I've bid jobs, and in 1 week I bid $1 million worth of work for Boyer Painting, and I was like, nope, didn't get it, didn't feel good. But watching a 5-year-old compete at their first tournament or get their first belt, and you feel different. I was like, oh, okay, this isn't it for me. Because I remember being confused, because I remember writing all the numbers out, and I'm like, wow, I bid and we received. We didn't get $1 million, but we received the bids. We did get the jobs. And there was nothing. There was no, I felt good, but now going to a tournament all day and watching students compete, just being at the tournaments in general, I feel great. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one thing people don't understand, is that we all feel the benefits of this. It's just giving that back, and this is the best way to do it.
Yep. If everyone pursued their passion as their job, their career, the world will be a lot better place. We'd have a lot happier people out there. You might not be making as much money as you would want, but like for me, I've learned to accept that even though I don't make like tons and tons of excess to go like take a trip every week or whatever, I make what I need to make to support myself and my family. I make enough to have a little bit of extra, to have a little bit of fun, but I'm content because I love what I do. And like because of the structure of things that I do, half my day is pretty much dead time anyway, that I'm like spending either working on new projects or, reading a book. I've started getting into reading more, stuff like that. So I have the luxury and freedom that a lot of people don't have with their schedules because of the way that I run my business. Mm-hmm. And I'm content. A lot of people are always searching for more. What's the next thing they can have? What's the next thing they can have? I'm happy right where I am. Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for people to get, and that's an amazing thing for you to have at your age. It's something that I've always been bad about, chasing the next thing. Coach Aaron Hensley calls it, I got shiny object syndrome. I tackle one goal and I'm like, boom, what's the next goal? And I've realized as I gotten older, I'm 42 now, that's not gonna work in the long term of things, because you don't, you get tired, you get fed up with it. We had a big snowstorm recently, and it was the first time I can think of in at least 10 years. I just sat around and played cards with the kids. We trained a little in the garage, we did a little bit of this, but I was so content to hang out and enjoy myself. And I realized that when I step back and just focus on what I'm here to do, it's better. And it's been a huge, huge turning point for me as I've just focused more inward on just martial arts and enjoying that and being content with it, not chasing the next challenge. And there's so many people that do that. I was lucky. My dad, my grandfather, my dad, my brother, all of them worked for General Motors. And my dad would always tell me, he goes, I make great money. I hate my job. He go, because everybody'd ask him, how come you didn't get Matt in the union when he was 18? Because I could have went right out of high school, right into the UAW working like my brother did, making really good money. He goes, no, I want him to find what he wants to do in life so he is not stuck here like I am. My dad worked there for 48 years because the money was so good he didn't want to leave. And I'm really blessed that he was like, you're not going to do that. I'm not letting you do that. Back when I was younger, I was like, hey, that really sucks because I went into union anyways as a painter, but I was like, I could have went to GM. So it's a blessing to find that, especially, at your age, being able to know this is where you want to be is great. And it shows that your passion. You're always at a tournament, you're always coaching a kid, you're always working with somebody, and that's huge because most people in their 20s still are not, they're not there. I opened my school when I was 28, and I had such a huge disconnect from my peers. I didn't know what it was. I was just in a different place mentally. Not saying I was better than them. I was just on a different path.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people don't understand what we do and why we do it. My cousin always was like, I'm working for the government. This is it's a great path financially and all that. I'm like, yes, it is. And at a time I entertained, potentially working for the government, but, I make what I need to make, and at some point, if I need to pick up more work, then I will. But right now I'm content doing what I'm doing. And, I know you and I share faith, belief in God and all that. I trust that, what I'm doing is what I was put on this earth to do. And I trust that I'm going to have what I need in order to make bills at the end of the month. Yeah,
and that's a wild feeling. That's something I recently really found. Actually, a podcast episode last week, me and the lady it was on really dove into that and talked about it, how, some people catch on to that early. Others, I told my pastor, I was like, dude, it was just like a nagging feeling. And since I've redirected to that, it's a completely different outlook on life and where it has you to be. And to know you're where you're supposed to be is empowering, because even then when there are a hard month or there is something that you're like, dang, and there's that fruit dangling over there, I could go over here and make a bunch of money doing this. You're like, no, this is where I'm supposed to be. Supposed to guide people, supposed to be there for that.
And I had that exact thought like over the weekend because I had a couple of students that needed to pause for a little bit. And I was like, great, here we go. When I was starting to climb a little bit, get a little bit more income, straight back down, even itself back out. But, it was on drive when I was going to Ohio to visit some family. And then, so I was almost depressed just because I was like, I finally, God, come on, I finally started getting a little more income. Why'd you take some of that away from me? But what it did was it forced me to, think what should I be doing right now? So with those couple of students, one thing I did for them was, they're struggling financially. So how can I help them in a small way? So I give them one lesson a month for free just to keep them on track.
There you go.
Because I know that they're loyal students, they're loyal customers. I know that they're going to come back to me. It's not a matter of, I think they're going to take advantage of me for that one lesson a month. I trust them. I know that they're not going to just take that for granted, and they don't. But I need to keep them on track. We've come this far. I can't let them get off track. It's not about the money, all right? It's about keeping them on track. And just seeing their faces on Zoom every day, it brightens my day. So, it helps me out. Because, money is paper. It burns. Everything else, though, that lasts.
Well, and that's a hard thing to do, too, because I've noticed as we go into the first of the year here and now into second month of the year, new enrollments are down a little bit. People are being a little more frugal, and we kind of expected this through quarter one. But I get the same way. It's like, a few people decide not to stay with everything, and I get emotional about it, especially if it's a kid I really know needs the training.
Yeah.
That's where the business operations part really becomes hard. to work with them. And normally you'll find out it's something different. It had nothing to do with you, whatever. It just happens sometimes. But again, like you said, you got to step back, take a look at it, assess. And that's awesome that you're able to do that and think about that, because it does help those kids later. And you are going to get more clients from that. And people who see that and see their progression and your progression with them, it's been, it's huge. I know this weekend when Ben competed, I had him go over his stuff and message you. He was like, because Jocelyn had to do that with her coach. And I'm like, no, you guys message him. You're old enough now. Why am I messaging him all the time? I got to laughing at myself. Like, why didn't I? Because Jocelyn, I had he rode with my wife home. She rode with me.
Right.
And we had like a 50-minute drive. So I just tossed her the phone. I'm like, here. I said, send your coach your 2 videos and send her your breakdowns on what you did and what you think you need to fix. And she was like, and then Ben, I come home, Ben's like, because she immediately ran in and told him, so Dad's going to give you homework. And I was like, here you go, buddy. Send them. I was like, here's what's going on. And that was funny, because he was like, I got to do this. I'm like, yeah, I don't know why the heck I've been doing it. I had to laugh. I was like, oh, well, I was the one sending it. But seeing that commitment, seeing his growth even has been huge, because as a parent, training my own kids is hard, because you want so much for them, trying to maintain that passion. I've talked to several people on the podcast now about, my dad started martial arts after I did, so I didn't really have like Dad trying to help me with kicks. Like they knew better. The biggest issue I ever had was my instructor had me teach my mother a form. She started class at one point, and she kept telling me you just wait. I'm like, no, you step into your down block. I'll do it in a minute. And I was like, no, Mom, I'm the 2nd degree instructor in class tonight. You can't tell me no. And I remember Travis was like, Matthew, come here. You go over here. I was like, but I always find that interesting when parents, trying to walk that line as a parent with my kids in it's always hard. Did your dad come back to training after you started, or?
Yes, actually he did. So I started in 2002, and probably a month or 2 later, he started back up. They started him back at white belt. He got his purple belt back in the day. I actually have a cool story about him. I'll tell that in a second. But back in the day, he got to purple belt. So he came back, but they fast tracked him from white up to purple belt. It was like, month testing, which was not really what they did for our school. He got his black belt in 2005. I got mine in 2008. But I think that it was a little bit different. Of course, I was much more of a, we'll say, mild-mannered kid. Not that kids today don't have, and I'm not saying that your kids don't have respect for you, but with me, I can't really put my finger on why, but my parents were like on a pedestal my entire life. I thought they could do no wrong, that kind of a thing. Not obviously, no, that's not the case, but when you're a kid like that, growing up like that, you think they could do no wrong. And I think it was also probably a little different for me because, for you, the kids never saw your training going from white to black belt. I was seeing him go from white to black belt as I was doing it myself. So there's a little bit more of a respect that I probably had subconsciously, if nothing else, because I'm watching him as he goes.
Sure, you're in class together. Yeah.
So by the time he got to his black belt, I was like, that's what I need. I want my black belt. And then when it came time for red belt testing, because I don't know how you guys do it, but we called them phase tests. So you had to do 3 phase tests, which are like 6-hour tests, in order to get 1 stripe on your belt. After those 3, then you're eligible to test for your black belt.
Nice.
So when I got to that point, I really wanted to quit. I didn't want to do it. I was struggling to get through it because it was hard testing. Mile run, your time had to increase. Your time had to get better every test. Then you had to go right from the mile run, push-ups, sit-ups, Korean terminology, all of your self-defense techniques, forms, kick combinations, mat work like rolls, throws, then sparring and all that. I just didn't want to do it. And then my dad said, no, you made the commitment to get your black belt. You're going to get your black belt. If you want to quit after it, and you quit after it, but you're getting your black belt. And he took me every morning. We would get up, we'd go to the school because he was the program director. So he had access to the school. So we'd go there, we'd train for an hour or 2 every morning. And that's what really kept me on that path to get it. And then, once I got to the black belt, then my mentality changed. I took a little bit of break, but once I got there, my mentality changed.
And that's an important lesson for people to hear too, because there's so many people that get close
Yep.
and don't. And I always tell them, and we all know this from being in martial arts, we've never met anyone that said, I really regret getting my black belt. Most of them are, man, I regret quitting right before.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
no, but that makes a lot of sense, though, because you train in side by side with them. My kids have just always seen me as the teacher. I'm always the one that's the teacher.
Yep.
And doing it.
Yeah, and that's like...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
No, I would say as a kid, I was like yourself. I was pretty... my parents always say I was very easy as a child. You know, I have older siblings, the trouble, the stuff they pulled, different things. But my parents had them my dad had them at different age periods in his life. They're quite a bit older than me. If they're listening to this, they're way older than me. I'll just say that. My siblings are 20 years older than me. My mom and dad always said I was pretty easy to raise. Now, I will say with my kids, they are extremely confident, hard-headed, and stubborn, just like me and my wife. So there are times that I'm like, just taking a breath, where I wasn't, like, I really didn't push my parents that way, like mine have me. But they also, you know, I had a completely different life, stay-at-home mom, you know, just a different world than my kids have. But they also, you know, and it's hard when you're teaching your children, and then you're teaching other people's kids who listen to you great. You know, or I even watch my kids with their coaches, and I'm like, yeah, see, listen to me like that.
That's why when I have the opportunity, I tell Ben, listen to your dad. He knows what he's doing.
And I appreciate it, because it helps so much. We'll have seminars at the school or different things, whatever it is, and when this, even the older black belts will hear something that they've heard me say 100 times, they'll be like, and they'll just kind of look over at me. I'm like, yeah. I know I've said that 100 times, so yeah.
Yep. Well, it's funny for me because completely different. I'm an only child. I don't have any siblings, so my mom was, well, she was stay at home kind of, because originally my dad worked at a printing company during the daytime. My mom would stay home and homeschool me, and then by the time he was done, my mom would take me to the karate school because she worked the front desk. So I would go there, do lessons there. And so both of them were kind of stay at home to a degree, because one would get out of work, the other one would go in.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that really strained their relationship for a while there, just because they're not seeing each other as much during the week time. But it really worked out well. And I can't be more grateful for what they did to help raise me and put me through martial arts schooling and all that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a huge you know, the biggest thing for a parent would be to hear that right there of this is something, and it's something I'm really big with my comp team, is when we travel and do worlds, when we do the different tournaments and go outside of the US for things, breaking down the financials and telling them, being like, listen, you know, there are several students in this school that are good enough to have made this team, but their parents could not make the commitment financially. So when you're getting flustered with mom and dad about something silly at home, I really want you to think about it. I've even made them get up before and go give mom and dad a hug and just say thank you. I'm like, you guys really need to understand the commitment to it, that it's the hours in the chair watching you. And I'm big with this on the students in general. You know, I don't want to say I don't allow it, but I definitely make it clear that that it's not part of our program, but that's just dropping kids off and leaving. I want the parents there. I want them engaged as much as possible. We have a lot of chairs, and I make it a point to the kids to tell mom and dad thank you. That's a huge. I'm an antsy person. I cannot imagine sitting there for 2-3 hours a night. You know, I've got one, Edgar's dad will sit there for hours on end while Edgar and his mom do class. And I'm like, dude, you don't backtalk that, man, because that's quite the commitment they make for that. So for your parents, for that to be said is huge, because that, I think at the end of the day, as adults and as parents and even as coaches, like, them understanding that one day is all that we want, you know, to understand, be like, wow, they really did a lot.
I think it's important for the kids too, that they see their parents are invested in what they're doing.
Yes.
To not just drop them off, like, it's someone to babysit them for an hour and teach them some cool punches and kicks. They're invested in what those kids are doing. The kids need to see that. They need to feel like they're invested in that the parents are invested in what the kid is doing. Because if they're not, they just, like, you know, the kid's like, well, this is fun, but are they really proud of me? Are they really happy with what I'm doing?
Do they care?
Exactly.
You know, you'll watch the kids, they're like, oh, they're looking back here all the time. The parents will say that. I'm like, yes, put your phone down. They're looking to see if you see them. You know, they're looking to see that you're there. That's what I like about with like your lessons with Ben. We do those at my school. So I'm up at the desk and I'm doing my stuff or whatever, but I can see him. When he was doing them at home in the garage, I felt really disconnected from it because I want to support. Mine's weird though, because I got to support him, but at the same time, if I sit and watch him too much, he's going to keep looking at me.
Yeah.
In a different way because I also teach him. So I'm like, do, good job, yep, good. And then I'll watch him. When you guys get done, I'll be like, all right, recap. What'd you guys go over? And he'll show me some of the stuff, and it's good. It's a fine line, but I love the fact that they can do it there.
Yeah.
So I'm still able to be a part of it, so they know it's supported. They know. Plus, I think the mentality of going into the dojo helps. You know, training stuff at home. Even when I get people reaching out, want me to maybe come out and do like a self-defense class or whatever, if you're doing something at an office or whatnot, it's not, or elementary schools, it's not the same as in the school, in the martial arts school itself. It has that feel to it.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm curious, do you think that this is something that they're going to stick with when they're adults?
I think at some point they're going to fade a little bit, but their big thing, they love the tournaments, they love seeing all their friends, they love the travel part, and I've explained to them that they're welcome to do other sports, but they'll have to step away from martial arts a little bit. Mm-hmm. So they may not do all the tournaments, but I own the school, so I'm still going to have to go. And normally that deters them more into it. I think Jocelyn's pretty well made up her mind. She wants to do it. Ben says he does. Like he wants to teach or have a school one day, but I don't feel that he wholeheartedly means that yet. Whereas like she wants to help with class. She wants to, you know, I'll trip over if someone's like, hey, can I grab a t-shirt? She'll run behind the desk to get him the t-shirt and I'll trip over her trying to get it. Whereas he's, you know, getting into that middle school teen boy, I don't care about anything kind of attitude phase that I can't stand. In any of the teen boys,
Like looking in the mirror?
You know, I never did that. I was so ingrained and engulfed in martial arts. I never really had that, but I had my siblings, but they had already moved out. So my parents were much older. So I just had such a different lifestyle. And when I did hit the little bit of a teen boy, I want to hang out with my friends thing, my dad would he let my brother do that, and that's where my brother got in a lot of trouble. My brother still is on the streets till this day at 60 years old. And so he was just like extreme about it. So I would go to the dojo whether I wanted to or not, because if I was at home, he didn't beat me, but I'd be in trouble because he was like, no, I'm paying for you to go to class. But Ben is like mirror me of about everything. So yeah, it rubs me wrong sometimes.
Right.
But they're going to do it till they're 18 no matter what, and then what they choose to do with it after, that's fine. I just try to walk that line of not burning them out. You know? For sure. I wanted Ben to stick with traditional longer before doing creatives to give him a better base, because his basics were not as clean and crisp as I wanted them before he switched, but he was getting so burned out. That's why I reached out to you. I'm like, hey, I'm going to let him go ahead and, because he really enjoys it. He just absolutely loves it. Thought of putting on a traditional white gi right now makes him just cringe. He loves it, throws black.
Most kids that age, I find that, you know, I've had some kids, like parents reached out to me. He's like, we'd love for him to do traditional, but he's just not into it right now. It's like, you know, I get it. You know, it's that age. Like God only knows why I did traditional at that age. That's probably just because that's all I do.
Yeah.
And has the experience of knowing what's out there. I didn't. And as soon as I did know, honestly, like within a year, I dropped traditional and I was doing only creative anyway. So
yeah. Well, that's why I told him. I'm like, let's go ahead and do it. Let's have fun with it. You know, you can work on it, but you know, I'll show him. I'm like, look, this is where that traditional comes back in. Look where your feet are. Look where this is. You know, Jocelyn really enjoys the traditional. She's having a lot of fun with that. So I even told her maybe next year, let's do some creative, because I want them to be balanced. If they do want to pursue this later, I want them to be able to train multiple. You know, if a student wants this or that, not to be stuck into one thing because that's just what they liked. I've always seen that kind of hinder people. So what are your big plans as you go through the year to build, is it build coaching? You got some big competitions coming up. What do you got going this year?
That's the $1 million question right there. Well, coaching is always something I'm building. I'm going to tournaments this year, regardless of whether or not I compete. I don't really know what I see myself doing competition wise, just because financials are kind of tight right now. So putting out that extra money to compete when realistically it's not generating me anything out of it other than just some enjoyment, when I can just train on my own and still have the same amount of fun without putting out hundreds of dollars just to step on the mat for a trophy that I may or may not get or even want to keep.
Yeah.
So um, for me, competition really, my passion for competition in myself is starting to fade, I would say. I don't know what I plan on doing long term. I think after AKA, it was just kind of this epiphany. It was like, I don't really know that this is where my heart is anymore, is to like compete as hard as I was. I got all this crap back here. Do I really
Yeah.
need any more? There's a few things obviously that I want to still do. The longer I go, the more selective I'm getting about what I'm doing. You talk to me 5 years ago, you tell me there's a tournament, I'm going. But
Yeah.
nowadays, I don't really care about that. I want to go to Waco Worlds again. I want to go to Waco Pan Ams. I want to get some titles there. I am a coach for the World Games. I forget what this specific like abbreviation is. There's so many abbreviations for all the different like WKU, WKC, all that crap. But anyway, this is one of those other ones. It's World Games. It's going to be in Norway this year, and I'm one of the coaches for Team USA. So I am trying to figure out financials to go to Norway for that. If I go there, I'll coach and compete because if I'm going that far, I'm going to compete. I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 for sure.
Um, and there's plenty of options. There's creatives, Korean, all that kind of stuff. So I have options to do there. But over the past, last year was very, very difficult. There's a lot going on behind the scenes with my family. Mother's health was on a sharp decline. I don't know if I told you or talked to you about much of what happened last year, but my mom's health was on a sharp decline and wasn't sure if she was going to make it there for a bit, but she bounced back and
Awesome. Good to hear.
she's back what I'd say probably about 80% right now. So she's a lot better. Family's doing better. Um, Ended my relationship, which was for the best. I'll just leave it at that. But there was a lot going on up here that was just keeping me in a dark spot for a while. And I'm finally through all of that. And I just kind of I need to rest, recharge, and rebuild myself. And I am blessed that I did as well as I did in competition last year with everything I had going on. I got a silver and a bronze at U.S. Open, which is probably some of the biggest placements that I've gotten.
Nice.
I've got a first place at AK Warrior Cup and some from American Internationals, but I'd say U.S. Open was probably that I'm very proud of, getting second in Korean Challenge and third in the regular Korean division. So I'm proud of those. But last year was such a blur that like this year I need to just focus more on me. Obviously, the business is important, but
Mm-hmm.
I need to have a year where I just focus on what do I need to heal and move forward from everything that happened. So I don't really know where that puts me in competition other than the few things that I have left that I want to accomplish. But if you told me that tomorrow I was going to earn those 3 titles, I'd be done with competition.
Yeah. Well, it's when you got those goals. I'm saying myself this year, I'm focusing on building our team up really big, our comp team again. The last couple years, I competed a lot with my students, and it made it hard to grow the team and help them when I'm running across the room to go compete as well. And, focusing a lot. I've spent a lot of time focusing on my high rank black belts instead of all the students that were competing. So this year, our goal is to really grow that team. Now, I think I'll probably compete at Battle. But again, it's one of those like, well, I get the kids all registered, I get their lessons, I get all their stuff. It's like, do I want to throw the money in there just for me to do it? Well, at the time of registration, I don't. Now, once I'm standing there on the mats and everybody's in their uniforms, I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
Dang, I wish I'd have competed. So, it's always a catch-22, but I think I'll probably do Battle. But otherwise, I'm kind of in the same place, just rebuilding, refreshing on it all, because it does, when you're just so zoned in on competing, it does take away from other things. It's a very, to compete at a high level, it's not that you just show up and do it. You've got to work at it.
Sometimes you wouldn't really think it would because, we work out every day, we train a little bit every day, but it's such a different like mindset.
Yes.
So like you said, when I go to competition, like that's what the real epiphany was. Like my instructor, you probably know who he is, Kurt Shryock, from the competition circuit. He's my instructor now in Maryland. And in 2022, I guess it was, when you and I competed in Korea at Atlanta, on the big stage, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was so gassed that I barely did anything in my competition for like CMX the night before. I did horrible in that the night before. And I talked to him and he's like, well, it's because you're running around all over the place. You got like students in every room, plus you're trying to compete yourself. And then, I did well in the Korean. I got second that year, which that was another one of my favorites. Going first up out of like, it was like 25 people in the division.
That was a big division.
Yeah, that was a huge division. So to take second with that one, I was pretty happy with that. But after that, that's when it really hit me that it's like, it's kind of at this point, it's either or. Either I'm going to do well in my competition or I'm going to focus on my students. So which one do you want? And I got away with it for a couple of years because I told my students like, hey, I got my competition coming. You know what you need to do. You worry about you. If I can get over here, I will, but I got to worry about me too. So I got away with that for a while and I still do to a point, but at AKA, I mean, that was also such a long tournament. I didn't do my division till like 10 p.m. at night. Yeah. So, but nothing I'm not used to. And I know I'm not old, but at 27, it's still a different energy level than at 18. So yes. Like at 18, I could have done that easily. But nowadays it's, again, I feel like a grandpa saying it, but I'm not as young as I once was when it comes to like running all the divisions, running late at night. I don't have that, especially when I've got so much else that I have to do at a tournament beyond just worrying about me.
Well, and your priorities change too. Like you said, you can do it. You'll be a little gassed, but you can make it happen. But is it really benefiting you?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was always my hang up. Like I enjoy competing, I enjoy doing it, and there's some local stuff I'll probably, if we're gonna run the adult division in the morning, I'll get my team ready, I'll dress out, I'll go run it. I got helpers, I got people there, but is it worth pushing myself that little bit extra to then maybe we're waiting to run grands later that day, and because there's a couple times I've dressed back, I went back to coaching, somebody's like, hey, you didn't report for grands. I'm like, I didn't even think about it. So that's always something you got to keep in mind too. So as we kind of get to the end of our time here, if people want to reach out and find you and they want to book lessons or get information about coaching and stuff, what are the best ways for them to find you? Because we'll link all of that in the post when we put these up.
Definitely Instagram. That's where I get the majority of my clientele from, is just students that have found me on there. That's at Cameron Whittington, CAMERON _Whittington, WHITTINGTON. I am currently in the final stages of launching a website that'll be all about my coaching and whatnot, just for finding details on that. That'll be CameronWhittington.com when that does launch. My email and most of my contact information is on that Instagram. So if you just go there, you can reach out however you want, message, email, telephone, whatever works best for you guys.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today. This was a great sit down, and I'll see you soon on Ben's next lesson.
Yes, sir. You got it.